If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hello listeners, I'm your speaker Casey, and as many of you may know, I am currently undertaking the Psychology of Coercive Control Master's course at Salford University. I hope that this course will make me more informed and better equipped for future projects and interviews on the podcast. In the meantime, I will be releasing renewed versions of older episodes with updates from previous guests. If you want to find out what I remember from the time of each interview and get in-depth updates from the guests, I've been writing blog posts as I go through older episodes and adding them to my website, cultvaultpodcast.com, which you can also find links to in the episode description. You can find links on my website for support on navigating recovery from cultic abuse, to learn more about how to help a loved one, or become more informed about the subject of cults and coercive control. My emails are still open, and I am carefully curating a list of guests to speak with once I am back to interviewing officially next year. You can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com if you'd like to get in touch. And now, on to today's updated episode. Hello, Michael, and welcome to the show. Thank you so much for agreeing to chat with me today. This is going to be the first interview with someone who has experienced being a member of ISKCON. So I am really ready to learn more. Would you like to introduce yourself to listeners?
Okay. See, I'm Michael. I am 29 years old, and I was part of the Hare Krishna cult/religion between November 2020 and March 2021. I have always been interested in religion and religious movements, as well as philosophy, especially Eastern philosophy and mysticism. So I was drawn into the Hare Krishna religion initially due to those interests that I had in mysticism. I had explored Buddhism since I was in the 11th grade. I wanted to become a monk as a child. Before I graduated in the 12th year level, my thought process was I wasn't interested in, the rat race and achieving a high score, which they called the ATAR score, so a high ATAR score, and making a lot of money and focusing my life on material achievements. Since I was young, I was always interested in those philosophical, deeper meaning of life and the nature of existence kind of questions, and pursuing deeper practices and a deeper path, spiritual path.
Do you know where those interests come from? Because it's not, I don't think it's a typical interest for somebody as young as 11 years of age to kind of know that that's something that they wanted to pursue, something that they were interested in. Is it influenced by your parents, or is it just something you kind of picked up and realized you really had a deep interest in?
It was in the 11th year, so when I was in the 11th grade. But even before that, so I would say when I was 16 and when I went to Vietnam a few times, I was already interested in looking at reading the books that they had at the temple. I can't remember how old I was when I started becoming a Buddhist vegetarian, which includes not eating any onion or garlic because it's considered to raise your sexual appetites. So people don't consume that. And I was following this. I was doing meditation and attending the youth groups. When I went to Vietnam, I would go to the temple as a teenager. And I went to the temple regularly on Sundays in Australia. My parents were not really religious. They followed traditions. They were Buddhist, nominal Buddhist, so they were born into more of a cultural practice and tradition, but they didn't really deeply follow any religious beliefs. And my paternal grandfather, he was a Cao Dai monk. A Cao Dai is a syncretistic religion in Vietnam that has influences from spiritualism, seances, French culture, Victor Hugo, Catholicism, Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism. So there may be like a genetic link. I never remember meeting my grandfather. I met him when I was a baby, so I can't recall those memories. But I have a sense that there could be like a genetic, hereditary reason for my interest in religion, because nobody in my family has this interest. Nobody's, reading books on psychoanalysis and studying Jung and Freud and Marcus Aurelius. My dad's a carpet layer. My mum's, she's a homemaker. She lives with my dad, and my sister's an accountant, a chartered accountant who worked for Toyota, and she was married and she's getting remarried and she's got a kid. So no one in my family has those same interests or even the same questions that I had about life and the meaning and pursuing something different than just a picket fence kind of existence, the stereotypical American dream, Australian dream, or whichever country you come from.
When you would go to temple, would you go on your own then when you were a teenager?
Yeah, I quite enjoyed going on my own because I would collect books. I would eat the food that I wanted to eat because they did free vegetarian meals every Sunday, and then they also had paid meals that you could, if you wanted to buy chips, for example, you get chips. But some days they would have vegetarian pho, the Vietnamese noodle soup, beef noodle soup, but no garlic with the meat replacement, and they would have traditional Vietnamese food there, but done vegetarian. And I liked that more than actual Vietnamese food sometimes, because the way that the vegetarians chefs would prepare, like the Buddhist cuisine, Vietnamese Buddhist cuisine, it was flavored very differently. It was like a unique kind of cuisine of its own. Like with the Hare Krishna, it's the same thing. Like they have their own kind of unique, vegetarian lasagnas and mixed and curries and kind of things. People love their food actually. Yeah. Well, both the Buddhist food and then the Krishna food.
And for those who haven't heard of ISKCON before, what does that stand for?
The International Society for Krishna Consciousness. It's a movement started by a Indian Swami named Swami Prabhupada. That's his the name that was like an honorific name that was given to him. And he came to the US in the late 60s. He brought a devotional religion to the hippies based on monotheism and devotion to Krishna, who they consider the creator and the source of all avatars and existence. It's quite different to other beliefs in Hinduism and Indian philosophy. It's they don't believe in monism, that everything is God, and that the soul and the individual is God. They are absolutely against that. So that's Advaita Vedanta philosophy. They don't accept that, and they don't accept any supremacy of Shiva being God, the ultimate God, or Shakti or Deity, who's the female energy. They believe that everything is subordinated to Krishna in their specific variety of Hinduism, which they call Gaudiya. Their specific sect is called Gaudiya Vaishnavism. It's much more organized than, I guess, other kind of religious practices in India and Hinduism, because usually you do get sects which are called sampradayas that have a guru and a lineage and a dogma, but then you also have people who just practice worship at home, and they have what you call an Ishtadeva or a Kula Deva. Kula is family, so a deity that they worship because their family worshipped, or a deity in addition to that they worship personally because it's their chosen favorite deity. And so ISKCON provides a lot more structure in comparison to what someone who would just be like a nominal Hindu would practice.
Right, okay. Yeah. And it's my understanding that because of the different belief system that ISKCON has adopted, they are quite controversial in the realm of Buddhism.
So they disagree with Buddhism in their Sanskrit / Bengali hymns that they sing in the morning, like their songs that they sing at 7 a.m. or sometimes 5:30. It depends when it starts at the temple or at someone's house. The lyrics are, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Deshatarine, and it's. I think Prabhupada wrote this, and it means something along the lines of let our Guru help this world from impersonalism and voidism. And those terms, impersonalism and voidism, is Shunyavadi, Nirvishesha, which is a Sanskrit word, and it's referring to the philosophies of Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta. So Shunya is the emptiness of Buddhism, that philosophy, and Nirvishesha is the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta. So they believe that their guru is saving the world from these philosophies in that particular song, but is also assisting people to develop devotion for Krishna. So there's a lot of things that he's come in to save the Western world from, according to their belief system.
I suppose in some ways that might be where some people get confused, because you have the worship of Krishna, but you also have the worship of the man who founded the Hare Krishna movement. So it's often confusing at times knowing which person to worship, because some of the footage I've seen, some of the articles I've read, suggest that Prabhupada, he's the one who is often worshipped from things I've seen. I don't know if you think that's accurate at all.
I find it challenging to use certain terms, like I'm not sure worship or veneration, but I would say they have a deep respect for him and they venerate him, and they treat him as a representative, a pure devotee, which is one of the highest states that a human can reach on earth. So they believe he is a representative of Krishna, a Shakti avatar, a someone that Krishna has put his energy into, but they're not Krishna themselves. It's just someone that is embodies the energy of Krishna. So Prabhupada is one of these high status people who has come to bring a purified version of devotional worship to Krishna. And so when people are worshipping Prabhupada, or when they're venerating Krishna, they're venerating the teachings and the purity of those teachings and the purity of his character. So everything that he says is to be taken into account seriously and 100% with absolute belief and faith and conviction. So he's kind of like, it's similar to in Catholicism how they have a pope. Mm-hmm. So he would be kind of like the Pope version, the Gaudiya Vaishnava version of the Pope.
Okay. I think that's...
Obviously there were people before Prabhupada, but the latest Pope, I would like the latest representative, the final one, they do believe that there will be a future person who renews or renovates the Gaudiya Vaishnava religion, but their final representative is like Prabhupada. It's like how in Islam they consider Muhammad to be the final representative, or with the example I just mentioned with Catholicism, how the Pope is the living representative that is to be venerated and honored and loved, and you can't question them because they're so perfect and chosen by God. Like she's the chosen one. Yeah.
Those comparisons definitely make it easier for me in my mind to understand where Prabhupada stands within the ISKCON movement. And the word venerated, I think, is quite interesting as well. So it's not so much that people are worshipping him as they would Krishna, but they are venerating him and using him as an example of what to reach for it within your journey, your personal journey within the Krishna movement. That is the ideal version of commitment to Krishna is Prabhupada, and so he is kind of an example of what to strive for in terms of purity and closeness to Krishna.
And they also believe that his teachings are final. So if someone from the same Gaudiya Vaishnava religion, but from a different lineage, like Gaudiya Mat, for example, if they come in and say, you're doing it wrong, we believe in 64 rounds of chanting, you're only doing 16, which is a true thing for them. Or we can't eat quinoa for Ekadashi, which is a full moon fasting day. The Hare Krishnas will go straight to Prabhupada and follow only what Prabhupada says. They don't take the words of the other living orders seriously compared to... this would be more like initiated devotees. They would follow strictly what Prabhupada taught, because he laid out a very systematic way of practicing the religion with the 4 regulative principles of vegetarianism, no onion, no garlic, no mushroom, no fish, with no intoxication, including no caffeine, no coffee, no tea or chocolate, and no gambling and no illicit sex, and chanting 16 rounds. So he actually lowered to 64 to 16 because his disciples couldn't do it. So he had to adjust. And even when his adjustments are criticized as heretical or going against what was originally taught by the previous gurus and the previous senior representatives of the Gaudiya Vaishnava religion, or even the original founder, Chaitanya, people will still adhere to what Prabhupada said because they see the results of what he did as a reason to follow him. So because so much positive, what they believe is that there's so much positive change that he created. I think 108 temples were built, maybe more, during the time he was alive. And a lot of money was raised. And I think he sold the most Bhagavad Gitas in the world, millions of copies. I can't remember the exact number. But because so many lives were changed through his teachings, not through someone else's teachings on the same religion, people venerate what he did as the golden standard of religion. So it's like if in Christianity there are different popes or there's different orders like Catholicism, Orthodox, the Hare Krishna version of the Christianity debate would be we're the true Vaishnavas, or maybe that's not how they would frame it, but this is they do say that they believe that this is the highest path and that Prabhupada taught the best path. So every other path has its advantages. They accept Christianity, for example. They believe that Jesus was an avatar or a son of God. They believe that Muhammad was also like a representative of Krishna, but they believe they don't really closely follow the Quran or the Bible. They reinterpret it to fit their Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. So you'll have Christians who join Hare Krishna and they still believe in Jesus and they still believe in Christ and Krishna, because for them there's no contradiction. Krishna religion accepts Jesus and Muhammad. They only don't accept when Shiva, within Hinduism, they're very strict. In the GBC, for example, they banned the Durga festivals, the goddess of war. They've banned her, the worship of her as the supreme for Navaratri festival. And they've banned like a text by Tulsidas called the Ramcharitmanas, which is about Ram, but because it has an Advaitin Vedanta undertone, they consider it tinged with impersonalism, which goes against their philosophy that Krishna is a person, a spiritual person in the spiritual realm, and he's not just an energy. They believe that there's a direct relationship with Krishna and the devotee, which is what they call themselves. So, I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure I went off topic.
No. It's all of the information, especially the explanation of the phrases that are used within the movement and the translation into English is really helpful for people who may not be aware of the terminology, because then a listener might come across some of the terminology in the future and be able to understand exactly what those things mean, when a lot of the time some of that may be alien to primarily English speakers.
Yeah.
So you said the name Chaitanya a little while back, and I just wondered if you could explain the significance of that person within the Krishna movement to somebody who may not have heard of ISKCON before.
So in India, they have what is called Varna system, but I guess over time it transformed into the caste system. So Chaitanya was in the middle of this situation where the Brahmins at the time, the narrative of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas is that the Brahmins at the time were corrupted, or they were discriminatory and practicing discrimination against other parts of society, other people who weren't Brahmins. I'm not sure exactly if they were using the Varna system or the caste system at the time, because this would have been before the British. But it was during the Mughal rule. So Chaitanya rose out of this environment of discrimination against non-Brahmins, let's say. And he came in to reform the religion. He, rather than people focusing on textual knowledge and reading books, which he is also acclaimed for, but rather than focusing knowledge on Vedanta, for example, and studiousness in Sanskrit learning, he brought in the practice of chanting the Maha Mantra, and he took this out of the Upanishads. I'm not sure which one, maybe the Katha, or the Kena Upanishad. And in this Upanishad, it said, the only way for salvation in the Kali Yuga is to chant the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So he popularized this. Before him, there was another person who I won't mention now, but in case it kind of confuses the audience, but he brought the Maha Mantra into popular memory, I would say. So he disregarded the more, I guess, discriminatory practices, and he would go chanting from street to street, city to city, chanting the love of Krishna, and he was a mystic, so he would cry. And in his hagiographies, in the hagiography, which is the devotional biography that contains the miracles of someone, so it's not really considered exactly historical due to the miracles listed in there in the text. In these hagiographies, he went into various forests, and the animals were also chanting and singing with him. So he would cry, he would faint. His disciples would also cry in ecstasy, chanting the name of Krishna. They would play the drums and chant Krishna's name. So in Judaism, they have a similar figure called the Baal Shem Tov, who was a Jewish mystic who would also have divine mystical experiences. So that Chaitanya was this reformist who brought in devotion to Krishna. The practices from the Brahmins at the time, I think they were smarter Brahmins who believe in Advaita Vedanta philosophy. He wanted to bring a personal relationship with God. So there's a text, I haven't read it, it's called the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is kind of the disciples that I was with, they called this the graduate text or the postgraduate, where you start off with the Bhagavad Gita, which is the story between Krishna and Arjuna on the Battle of Kurukshetra. Arjuna's fighting against his uncles and cousins, the Kauravas, and he's the Pandava. So that's the Bhagavad Gita. And then the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a series of various stories based on Krishna, and it's narrated to or by Shukadeva Goswami, who's a Swami kind of a figure. And then there is the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is read after the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, is the most famous, and it contains stories of Krishna, Radha, the pastimes between Krishna and his consort Radha, the romantic and amorous dancing and singing and ecstatic experiences between him and the cowherd girls and the cowherd boys in Goloka Vrindavan. So they believe that this is kind of they believe this is their version of heaven. So that's the place where they want to serve Krishna when they reach the highest stage of devotion, which at the end they believe is decided by Krishna anyway. So you could be born as a hair on Krishna's chest. You could be born as a grass. You could be born in another life. You could come back to earth, similar to a bodhisattva. You could come back to earth to help humanity, or you could be reborn into the heavenly realm of Goloka Vrindavan and serve Krishna for eternity as his eternal devotee.
Oh my goodness. Considering the amount of time that you're involved with the movement, you certainly are well educated and versed in the history and practices of ISKCON. The overview that you've just given us it may not seem in depth to you, but to us that was a wealth of information that you've just given us.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time understanding the philosophy, researching it, going into even the organizational structure of the religion, the history, things that were peripheral to the actual beliefs itself, the actual theology of it. I was very interested in the theology, and it appealed to me because I found that Buddhism didn't offer me that theistic devotional element with music and chanting and these more sensory kind of visual practices for visual, sensory, emotional forms of meditation, spirituality. It was, with Buddhism, it was more austere, and there was chanting Namo Amitabha, but because the practice of Buddhism that my parents well, not really that they got involved in, but the type of Buddhism, Vietnamese Buddhism that they engaged in at the temple in my parents' house was Pure Land Buddhism, which was a mixture of like Vietnamese culture and Taoism, ancestor worship, Pure Land, Mahayana, Pure Land Buddhism beliefs about bodhisattvas and being reborn in the heavenly realms. But even then, I didn't feel deeply connected to it. So I guess when I get involved in any kind of spiritual practice or religion, I do a lot of research. But I did especially, I would say the religion that I've probably researched the most would be the Hare Krishna religion, because I was actively practicing it with other disciples. So my learning curve was really quick, really fast. And I took notes as well. Like I have notes in my books. Even though I've left the Hare Krishna religion, I'm still interested in Hinduism as a whole, in yoga and the philosophy of yoga and the various schools of Vedanta that came before the Gaudiya Vaishnava movement. So I can contextualize it as well. Like I can see how ISKCON is different from the other sects of Hinduism, and how the neo version, like the new versions of Hinduism, which I'll just call neo Hinduism, compared to the classical versions of the Ramanuja's Vishishta Advaita Sri Vaishnava version of Hinduism, and the Shakta versions of Hinduism, where they have specific sects like the Kamakya tradition or the Shaivism traditions. So I also did like some courses as well. Like after I left the Krishna religion / cult, it's kind of confusing what to call it, because there are people in there who sincerely believe what they are doing, but at the same time there are very cult-like practices, and some groups are more culty than other groups. So because there is like a central hub of Krishna teachings, the GBC in India, for example, and specific gurus, but because they've got 100 plus gurus, various small differences can be found. And then you have movements within the Krishna religion called the IRM, I think it's called. They are against what GBC does, but they still believe in Prabhupada. And they believe their gurus can initiate on behalf of Prabhupada and thus make disciples of Prabhupada, rather than make their own disciples, which the current ISKCON is extremely against that. So there are various different, and then there's also Gaudiya Mat, which is, they still believe in Krishna consciousness, but they practice it slightly differently. So I've also met people from Gaudiya Mat, and I've met someone who got initiated into the Sri Vaishnava religion which was created by Ramanuja, or it was popularized by Ramanuja. And I've watched some content from people who are from the Advaita school, and also with my courses, the course that I did with the Yogic Studies group, directed by Seth Powell. He provided a lot of courses that talked about various practices in Shaivism, Shaktism. There was nothing on Vaishnavism. There was a Bhagavad Gita course, the Samkhya Karika course, which is a text based on this on a book called the Samkhya Karika, which talks about the specific philosophy. It's like an elemental philosophy of like 25 elements, but I won't get too much into that because it might be information overload. So yeah, I kind of learned as much as I could about everything in Hinduism, because it's so vast and broad.
your depth of knowledge is so impressive, and I wonder how much. I hope we get as much information from our interview as possible, but I don't know if that's going to be something that we're able to do, because it sounds like you just have so much to offer. But we'll try our best. We'll try our best. So let's start at the beginning of your journey. You come across ISKCON at the age of 27, 28?
28, 28.
So you're 28 years old. You've always had an interest in Eastern philosophies and mysticism, maybe some like hereditary connection with your grandfather who you'd never met, but had also had similar interests in a vast amount of different spiritual movements. So how did you actually come across ISKCON, and how did you become involved?
So I was on a New Age server on Discord, which is it's kind of like a gaming. It started off as a gaming app, but now it's kind of a social media app where people can chat and live stream and have conversations with people. So I joined a server on there, and I listened to some people talk about, mainly two people. One person talked about the Bhagavad Gita. She actually played it in the voice chat on the New Age server. And people weren't that interested. They were talking over it. So I decided I would listen to this on my own. And then I also spoke to I made a friend on a Myers-Briggs server who talked about the Bhagavad Gita. And he talked about comparative religion as well. So I decided, I want to get into this. I've always wanted to read Bhagavad Gita. It was quoted by Oppenheimer, the person who created the atomic bomb. It was mentioned by various other authors, transcendentalist authors in the United States. So it was always a text that I wanted to get into. And I was always interested in Hinduism more than Buddhism because of their idea that there is an Atman, a consciousness or a soul in the Gaudiya version, compared to the non-self Buddhism. So when I listened to the audiobook for the first time all the way through, and as I was taking notes, I fell in love with the message, and this was the as it is version. So I fell in love with this message, and I wanted to practice whatever it was teaching. And I knew it was based off the Hare Krishna. I knew it was the Hare Krishna book, but I didn't know so much about what they did other than basic knowledge about it being a cult. So I watched some documentaries on their religion, and I decided, this is kind of related to my interest in wanting to learn Sanskrit, wanting to practice, wanting to be a monk, which I had wanted to do since I was in the 11th grade. It kind of connected with everything that I was already interested in: vegetarianism, in morality, in chanting mantras, using the Sanskrit language as a spiritual practice. So I kind of had an idealized vision going into it, despite having the knowledge about being a cult, which is kind of funny. I was also interested in cults as well, so I decided to call up the temple, and then a girl said to me, I'll contact you with a local monk, and his name is Davija, so I got into contact with him. And I told the girl over the phone, and I told him that I wanted to be a monk, and I was interested in initiation and all of this stuff, and I downloaded a PDF to their initiation manual and all the books that you needed to read, and I had read the books, except for the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then I got deeper into that religion, but that's how I started. Since my childhood interest, and then since last year with my childhood interest with monasticism, and last year my encounter with the Bhagavad Gita and the Western kind of experience of Hinduism and New Age philosophy, and then actual direct contact in around November with Hare Krishna devotees. So it kind of was, I would say it was gradual for me, but within that time frame of 1 to 2, 1 year, or like maybe 6-7 months, a lot happened in such a short period. And it's kind of shocking to even think how I even how my energy was so purely directed into that one thing, because it's very hard for me to focus on things as well, with like mental health and getting distracted and anxiety. But when it came to the Hare Krishna religion, I just jumped straight into it. It was pretty intense.
I think you may be one of the very first people that we've had on the show who purposefully sought out a group that they knew had actually been labeled as a cult.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to do a psychological experiment. I know this sounds terrible in retrospect, but I had experienced sexual abuse as a child, and I wanted to understand, like, what is the mindset of sexual abuse? And was a very I guess this is a very unsafe, but like psychologically dangerous way to explore this curiosity, because I'm a very curious person. So I wanted to understand like the dynamics of a cult, and also the experience of like a very presenting way of a very strong image of what authenticity and tradition is. So I wanted to explore that, even though I didn't really think it was authentic in my personal opinion. I felt like the whole idea of them being, the most authentic representation of devotional monotheistic Krishna devotion, in the most pure form of monotheistic devotion to Krishna in the world. So I wanted to break it down and explore what it meant, and then I also wanted to pursue my personal interest of becoming a monk and learning Sanskrit. Obviously, it didn't turn out this way. Like, I realized I was also being manipulated into attending more events, and how I had originally wanted, the, I guess, like psychological curiosity, satisfy my psychological curiosity about the human mind and about religion and about the nature of existence. That was kind of pushed aside, and I was kind of pressured to attend more events and to do more volunteering, which they call service, devotional service. It's one of the ways that people express their love for Krishna, by doing practical acts of devotion, cooking for Krishna and then serving that to other people, offering food to Krishna, which becomes mercy, or it's translated, it's called prasad in Sanskrit. So all of these ritualistic practices get involved and implemented. And I'm also very attracted to rituals, so I found a lot of their practices very enjoyable. I started chanting, and then within 2 months or something, I did 16 rounds, and then I started doing that every day. So it kind of gave me a leveling system. I don't know, it's not really a game, but I kind of felt like I could achieve little things, and those little things would be rewarding. But then it got to a point where there was a lot of manipulation and lying going on, especially lying by omission. So people would have a lot of hidden intentions, and I would only find out by doing research or by asking other people who knew about the religion, and then I wouldn't tell them. And then when I did tell them that I was going to this place or this person, they would have a massive freak out. So, and they would only show me through their facial reactions. They would never, one of the senior members who was running the Bhakti Lounge, which is a side project of the ISKCON religion. It's not directly part of the temple. It's a separate thing under their guru, who is also not directly controlling the temple, which is in control by the temple manager. So he, the Devamrita Swami, who's the guru of the Bhakti Lounge, the Mantra Lounge people, they wanted to accumulate more disciples for their group. And I never knew this until I started listening to his lectures, and I kind of started to analyze it. And then I started asking other people, and then all of the things, the puzzle fit together. And then when I brought this up that they were being dishonest, I would get accused of being ungrateful. When I brought up that I was no longer interested in the Bhagavad Gita classes, I would get called fickle. So little kind of, I don't know if I'll call them microaggressions or abuses, but I'll do this. I can't really think of the most accurate countries, but like these little kind of microaggressions that they did, I started to question. And there was a point where I realized I can't have a negotiation or conversation, even though that's what they advocate in their religion, which is to have a one-on-one relationship when you open up to someone who is a devotee and you have a deep connection with them about your inner world, and they kind of play like a therapist role on top of the guru that you have, or on top of the guru that you are aspiring to take shelter of. So in their system, they have all of these interesting, idealistic forms of dealing with emotional, psychological, spiritual life problems, marriage. They have a whole system for everything, but it only sounds perfect in theory. So in practice, they didn't have this pure love and pure happiness. They were just like normal people, but hiding it. They were hiding the fact that they had very human problems like jealousy and sexuality, and even though they had secrets, they were secret about their secrets. You know, sometimes people will say things like, "Oh, that's a personal," but they wouldn't even acknowledge that they were hiding anything.
Sorry, Michael, just 1 second. Your internet connection is dipping in and out again. I think you might have to turn your camera off as well for a little while just to see if that.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Let me stop the video. Okay, is that better now?
Give it just a few seconds to see if it works itself out. You're giving us so much great information that I don't want any of it to be lost because of the.
Okay. I'm glad that you told me that, because I would have kept going with
Yeah, there were so many things in what you've just said that I wanted to kind of pick apart and go back over. So, first of all, just to comment on what you were just saying before about not being completely transparent about things as you became more involved with the movement, there was a testimony that I read online of somebody who spoke about being approached by somebody who was recruiting for ISKCON. And when this person told them, "Oh, well, I'm a Christian," it was worded to them that it didn't matter if you had a religious affiliation elsewhere, because you could practice being close to Krishna simultaneously to your religion, but then over time it was actually kind of systematically expected that you would spend less time going to church on Sunday and less time involved in religious commitments because you had too many commitments to Krishna to be able to fulfill those religious commitments that you had elsewhere. So I thought that that was an interesting thing to add to what you were already saying there. And what you said about being interested in knowing that this movement had the cult label attached to it, but almost giving yourself a social experiment by going into the movement to kind of see what it was really like. And you said it was strange, and it might sound strange to some of the listeners, but actually on the subreddit r/cults, there are weekly posts, sometimes daily posts of people who will access the subreddit and say things like, is this a cult? Or I think I've just been approached by a cult member, or I think somebody's trying to bring me into their cult. And a lot of the people will say, like, this is what happened. This was the interaction. They told me to meet them here, or this is what I do next if I want to join.
Okay.
And a lot of these people will then say, I'm thinking about joining just to see if I can find out anything else. And so many of the people in the comments will then say, if that's what you decide to do, just be extremely careful, because there will be very, very clever ways of bringing you further and further into the group that you might not realize what is happening to your freedom of mind until it's too late, which is kind of almost what you mentioned there about the small manipulations and the lying through omission that happens like kind of slowly over time as you became more involved with the movement itself.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point that you mentioned, that it's not only me who has curiosity about new religious movements. There's a subreddit on it. I also saw a YouTube channel about a girl who recorded videos with the Westboro Baptist Church out of curiosity. And she also recorded with Scientology and talked about her experiences and made a vlog. And she talked about how she was getting pressured to attend more courses and pay for more courses. So there are people like that out there who are similar to me, but
just curiosity, yeah, absolutely, and the human
it's strange
interest
as well.
Yeah, just to want to learn more. Like, oh, is it really as bad as people say it is, or is it really as culty as people say it is? I want to find out for myself. But you also mentioned a bit further back that when you originally reached out and you were partnered with a monk in the area that you lived in, that there would be an initiation into the movement. So how did that happen? How did you officially become involved in ISKCON?
Initiated.
Okay.
But I was affiliated and volunteering regularly for the Mantra Lounge, which is a movement started by Devamrita Swami, who's a guru in ISKCON, and he kind of grew into the role in the 80s and became more well-known, after the 90s into the 2000s. So his, I didn't really pay much attention to him at the beginning. I just thought, I don't really like his talks. I find him kind of annoying.
And this is the talks given in the Mantra Lounge?
He had online talks and he also had Zoom calls. So I had listened to some of them, but I thought a lot of it was kind of nonsense. Because he wasn't really directly addressing the issues that I thought were really important, the philosophical life issues. He was actually addressing very simple, what is happiness? He would just kind of water things down. And then in his later lectures that he would give to his more senior disciples, he directly told them things like, don't tell them that you're there to preach to them. Just serve them nice food and act like it's completely natural. So he would actually encourage people to lie. I consider that a form of lying. So he would encourage people to conceal their true intentions. And I kind of listened to these as I was getting out of the movement, but it was actually very difficult to leave because I think they wanted me to stay. Now that I think about it, it did seem like they actually wanted me to stay more. So maybe the monk was kind of putting more pressure and effort and negativity and microaggressions into his interactions with me. But I had to stop contacting them and tell them, I had to say to Devija and Nikeshri, who were the monks there, that I'm going to focus on studying Sanskrit. I know that sounds similar to the Hare Krishna religion, but it's not what you guys are offering, to be honest. And I'm not going to be attending the Mantra Land events regularly. If I go, I go. If I want to go to the temple, I'll go to the temple, not their Mantra Lounge, because they were under the instructions of Devarita Swami, which they didn't tell me. He did not want Western devotees mixing with the Indian devotees because he didn't want the strictness of whole Hare Krishna religion to be kind of watered down and made into like a fun kind of not fun, but like a watered down temple-based experience. He wanted people to become very disciplined, chanting regularly, not being disillusioned with the movement, which he in his lectures said that people were disillusioned, the more senior members. So he wanted kind of to preserve a state of innocence and naivety, but also strict discipline about the Hare Krishna religion. And he wanted to create his own kind of subgroup where he could tightly control the environment and have the senior disciples manage it without the control of the temple manager, Aniruddha, which is the Melbourne manager. He had his side thing, and then he kind of introduced his disciples slowly to the temple once they were ready to get initiated. So that was his kind of strategy. And I didn't really figure this out until I started reading materials analyzing how Hare Krishna is how Hare Krishna religion works in the modern age. I kind of knew about the child abuses, but I didn't really know much about the inner workings of what people with different gurus think of each other, or how gurus would control certain parts of the local country that I'm in, the local part of the town that I live in. What the Hare Krishna religion was like specifically in Melbourne, in Australia, in New Zealand. I didn't really know that aspect of the religion. I kind of just knew the history and the most sensationalist parts of the religion. But I would say that it's equally as, even though I have not heard of any instances, I have read that there were like abuses even in the Melbourne temple, but they have been covered up. And there were like sexual elicitings, so of women. But Devarita Swami, again, he, in a recording on SoundCloud and on one of the Hare Krishna news websites, is like independent from ISKCON, they revealed an audio recording that he, for some reason, was made of him, saying that a girl who was sexually assaulted or who was sexually elicited should just accuse herself of making a mistake.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, rather than holding the person accountable for a sexual assault incident or a sexual harassment incident, he directly encouraged his disciples to tell the victim to blame herself. Which I think I think it's very strange because, there are probably people who know this and they accept it. So they accept what's happened and what he says, and they think that he's done a really good job in...
No, what he said is so irresponsible. Given the position that he is in, so irresponsible and immoral and unethical and just wrong. And it's difficult. It's hard because you have said that.
Well, in one of his talks, he called women toilets.
No.
Public toilets. So he said some pretty outrageous things and offensive things about women.
Do you think that his word, like Prabhupada's, might be taken as gospel by some people?
Yeah, so they take it very seriously, but they don't tell you that this is what Devamrita Swami says. They tell you that this is what Prabhupada wanted.
Oh,
this is
right.
This is the Hare Krishna way. This is about chanting 16 rounds and doing pure devotional service. So they reframe everything to make it fit and suit the the dominant ideology, but they have their own agenda going on, which is they want to accumulate disciples in their sect, and they don't want other people to know what they're doing.
Yes, and the behavior and information control that you
deliberately withholding information and controlling the flow of information to who gets it. And they would also scheme about like me, about my friend Jen who was attending. So they would kind of have conversations about other people and how to get them more involved and they would frame it in a way that they sounded like they cared about the person, but in fact they would what they were really interested in was just getting them to go more to their events and commit to their group and religion. And when I told one person something, I realized that other people knew. So when I told Bhakti, for example, that I was no longer attending their classes in the Nectar of Devotion, which is one of the texts that you read before you get initiated, I found out that one of the other devotees, Jane, had just casually mentioned to me, "Oh, so what do you think about this other class that you're attending with the Nandas group?" And that was really weird because I never intended for him to know that I was attending other.
So your information is being publicized or shared between other people. Okay.
And my information, but also my friend's information, and they would justify it in the way that it's all done for Krishna's service. So everything was framed in a devotional, spiritual
explained away. Yeah.
They would rationalize a lot of their negative behaviors. So what I would consider negative, what you would consider negative, they would just say, that's Karmis, they're non-devotees, they're just in the material world, we're pure devotees, or we're following the instructions of Prabhupada, and this is what he wanted, to chant regularly, and to eat vegetarian, and to love Krishna, and to make more, to spread Krishna consciousness. So they would you have to kind of really truly believe this in order to, I don't know if commit these atrocities is the right term, but you'd have to really believe in your own lies or delusion to deliberately harm other people or deliberately mislead other people. So they truly kind of, even though they were doing a lot of messing around with the original teachings, when I spoke to Davija, the monk who was kind of mentoring me, and I said, "Oh, why don't you guys wear tilak, the sacred clay markings on your forehead, every day? Why don't you do what Prabhupada said, which was to wear certain types of clothing regularly, the traditional monk clothing?" And he said, "Oh, we're just being practical." So he would explain away how certain things were practical, but therefore he didn't have to do it. But I started to realize that they would do a lot of weird things, like they use expensive phones, and apparently that's for Krishna's service, and they would accept wealth because it's Krishna's feminine energy. It's Lakshmi, which is the goddess of wealth. So they would have explanations for everything. If they would wear expensive, $300 jackets from Kathmandu, and they would present themselves in more fashionable ways if they were going to more expensive suburbs in Melbourne. So people would be more convinced by their appearance and buy more books, which they called book distribution. They didn't call it. They would say it's, spreading the knowledge of Krishna, but really they were funding the temple, and they would have to do this every day. They would need to sell a certain amount of books, make a certain amount of money, at least $8 per book, or they would have to break even if they sold, a certain number of books each day. So there's a very pragmatic and practical reasoning behind everything, but it's never really explained to you unless you really analyze it or look deeply into it. All you really see is the positive spiritual thing. You'll never hear about the critical aspects of the religion.
And I guess that must be difficult. It must be difficult in that sense to navigate the movement itself then, especially if you're there to perhaps become involved in some of the services that focus on the teachings of the movement and the heritage of the movement and the ideals around the movement, but then also to kind of see what a high demand control group is like from the inside. I suppose then it must be very precarious to navigate your way through, especially with the thought, behavior, and information control that you've just explained there. And you mentioned at the very start of the episode that you believe that some temples and some gatherings and groups within the ISKCON movement may be more cult-like than others. And from what you're saying here, the mantra lounge itself has lots of manipulation and coercive tactics involved. And so
they were definitely more culty than the actual temple, which is very strange.
It is strange when you think that ISKCON itself has been labelled a cult, so then you've got like cults within cults then almost, if it stands to reason that the Hare Krishna movement, it does have methods of control.
There's an actual special reason for this, which I've done the research into, and it's called the Hinduization. This is what sociologists call it. They call it the Hinduization of ISKCON. So families from India who are living kind of normal lives, they join the temple as a temple congregation, like something that you would go to church on Sundays. So for them, they would no longer, there was, a shortage of people becoming serious devotees and chanting 16 rounds a day and becoming monks. Families would go in, children would go in, and people would have day jobs rather than give up everything. ISKCON has kind of been domesticated more in the Indian community, not in the Western community, where you have Indian families from Hindu backgrounds who don't necessarily have 100% dedication to the religion. And the people who do have dedication are funding the religion using money sourced from their own day jobs rather than necessarily being full-time devotees or disciples. So it's transformed into a family kind of based movement with kids, children, young adults, parents attending regular meetings. So it's kind of become less culty in a micro way, and then it's become more culty in other ways with these movements like Radhanath Swami's I don't know what his lounges are called, but Radhanath Swami's disciples, with Devarita Swami's mantra lounge. So the cult element is still there, but it's kind of hidden away, and they kind of market Krishna consciousness as a mindfulness practice. So they, similar to the Vedanta Buddhist religion, they kind of present to you images of people meditating on mountains and having delicious vegetarian food, and comments of people with kind of titles of how to de-stress and how to live a life of peace and how to overcome anxiety. So they kind of use mental health as a platform to lure people in. So they try to take people with mental health problems and indoctrinate them into the Krishna religion. Whereas with like the Hindu the way that the Indian community markets Hare Krishna religion, you straight up get pictures of Krishna, you straight up get pictures of Prabhupada, you straight up get pictures of, people talking about love and devotion. So it's very straightforward because, Indians are used to the imagery and the language and the culture because they were born with them. Anything to do with ISKCON or Krishna, it's not foreign to them. Whereas with Westerners, they have done this very kind of deliberate whitewashing of the Indian culture to make it look like it's kind of some urban meditation group, which it isn't. It's not urban meditation. It's still the Krishna religion.
You've used words as you've spoken, like affiliate, initiate, devotee. So is there a hierarchy or pyramid system in place within ISKCON in terms of your level of commitment? Is it sort of like a phase progression? You kind of have to go step by step by step. How does it work in terms of recruitment?
So I noticed this structure. I haven't really analyzed it in a business or economic sense. It has been called a pyramid scheme by other people who've reviewed or analyzed the religion, and I do consider it a pyramid scheme actually, because, for example, it's run by the Mantra Lounge and the disciples of Devarita Swami. He has many groups. He has a group in New Zealand, in Philadelphia. He has at least two groups in Melbourne, and they don't always communicate with each other. They have like the urban yoga, which is also an ISKCON movement, but it's done with different disciples with the same guru. And then there's the Mantra Lounge, which is the same guru but different disciples. So he has two groups in Melbourne, but they don't mix. And they also don't mix with the temple. So they're kind of like competing against each other. And then I actually researched about what this method of recruitment and, I guess, proselytization is called. And it's called Bhakti Vriksha. I think that means root. And they kind of plant a tree, and then they plant another one. And then they plant another one. That's kind of how they view it, at least in that article that I read, that this is how they want to kind of create, they want to spread the religion, which small groups spreading across. They kind of want to, it's in a way they want to repeat what is, which I don't think is ever going to happen again. Because the movement's changed so much, people have access to anything up.